Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Velero community meeting / open discussion. Today is April 7th, 2020. And per usual, we're going to start off with some status updates. And I'll share my screen so everyone can see what we're talking about. All right, first up, we got Nolan.
Yeah, so I am on community support this week. That's the first thing. I am working through backlog reviews. Big one I did was last week was with Carlisia's CLI improvements, and then working on various CSI ones with Ashish and others as they come through. One thing that I kind of did in the evening last week was somewhat related to the CLI work, because there's some readiness changes there. It was an HTTP endpoint for testing liveness on Velero. This is kind of a spike just to try things. And it may fix some things for, I know Anthony Bett from Dell had mentioned some problems that this may take care of. There's still some fix up I would have to do for this, but if anybody is curious about this, you can go ahead and try this. I think Dylan's on this call. This may be of interest to him, but this would also make it possible to start Velero without having a backup storage location defined. But you would then have Kubernetes checking this liveness endpoint to indicate whether or not the pod should be restarted. So if you're curious about that, check it out. It's not super high priority at the moment, but something I threw together in an evening last week. Going back to the other things I've worked on, Steve and Ashish and I were talking about some of the data modeling and flow through the CSI plugins last week, and Ashish has some PRs that I think the PRs that came out of that meeting were mostly merged. We got I'll let Ashish talk about those. I'm continuing to test the CSI integration with Core. There's probably going to be some changes that I have to make to account for the changes we discussed. That I need to come back to on this. And then I've also noticed last week some folks reported some more CRD issues. One of these look like they are, if you Jonas, if you could scroll on that first command line output, if you scroll horizontally on that, over a little bit more, true, a little bit more. There we go. So per version, yeah. So this error, this is something to do with CRDs in, I think, V1. It complains about if you have multiple versions defined in your schema for your CRD, it wants, and they all have the same values, it wants you to define that at a top level instead of setting that per version. So that's something we may have to revisit. I've seen it, just wanted to acknowledge it, but I have not taken a closer look at it yet. So I just wanted to let people know we're aware of it. And then the next thing was had some check-ins with Rafael and Carlisia on some of his work, which I think he's going to discuss later on. Some things he's going to present to the data protection working group on how he's expanding on how we handle versioning on various API groups. And I think that's what I've got, if anyone has any questions.
Great. Yeah, any comments, questions for Nolan? This issue here that you were talking about, does that correlate with Rafael's work that he was showing last week?
I know that so Raphael's issue work is not merged yet. His work is about grabbing all versions of any data type, whereas this is particular to CRDs, and I think this is a result of doing some conversion from V1 beta to V1 of the custom resource definition itself. And I think V1 is more strict about what it wants. From what I've read in these issues, the restore will finish and the cluster is functional and you can use the CRDs, but they will generate an error in Velero. So we may have to change those errors to warnings or something. But I need to look at it in more depth.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Next up, Steve.
Yeah, hey everyone. Past week, so we released 1.3.2 on Friday. This was a minor release, probably not an essential upgrade for most folks. It enabled plugin authors to store data within the main Velero bucket and fixed the small client-side bug in the Velero restic repo get command that essentially just threw a panic when a restic repository had just been created but not yet initialized. So for most folks who are already on 1.3.1, probably not necessary to upgrade, but never hurts. Beyond that, a bunch of discussion and reviews on the CSI snapshot work and the install and config UX design work, so I won't go into those anymore. I spent most of yesterday looking into possible ways to report backup progress. So this is something we've kind of had in the backlog for forever. It's maybe our oldest issue that's still open. But we've talked about having some way to count the total of number of resources that we're going to back up and then provide updates as we're going. So yesterday I was just looking into possible ways that we could change our code to enable this. And what I was mainly looking at yesterday was sort of separating the backup process into two parts. So, if you think about how our backup code works, it essentially, first it has to hit the Kubernetes API to get the YAML or the JSON for a given resource. Then it does some processing on it. In particular, looks to see if there are any backup item actions to run for it, or any other custom logic like triggering volume snapshots. And then finally, it takes that JSON and actually writes it to the tarball that becomes the backup in object storage. And so I was looking at basically separating that process out so that the first thing we do is actually collecting all of the YAML representations from the API as a single step, so that at the end of that step, we know kind of how many total resources there are that we need to back up. And then as a second phase, going into the running of plugins and triggering snapshots and actually writing things to the tarball. So I came up with a very basic prototype of modifying the code to work that way. That seems to work okay. So I'll probably provide some more updates on this in the coming week or two. Didn't really want to do a demo today because there's not much to see other than some log statements indicating that resources are being counted. But hopefully we'll come up with an approach that makes sense here and try and get something implemented.
That's great.
Hey Steve, could you change the label on that from P3? Or is that not, or is that still P3?
I don't know, but I can change
Okay.
it to. I mean, at this point, I think we're basically just investigating. So it's, not necessarily scoped into a release, but we wanted to have a sense of if there is a way that we can do this, or essentially how expensive it would be to do this. So
Fair enough.
And then, just one last thing because I was looking at it this morning, I noticed that backups had a random kind of 15-second pause at the beginning of them. This might be occurring with restores too, but I noticed it with backups. And this is something that we've had issues with before, but I discovered that there's a bug in the client Go version that we're using around the discovery client where all the requests are getting throttled. So this is happening to us. We could look at bumping. I think it was fixed in the 0.17.1 release of Client Go. So we could look at upgrading prior to our next release, or we could just live with it. And we'll probably bump our dependencies before we release 1.4. So anyway, basically just wanted to make folks aware of it. And I think that's all for me.
All right. Any questions, comments for Steve? Okay. Carlisia.
All right. So I addressed the code reviews, all of the code reviews on the CLI PR. Thank you for that. And they were very light at this point. So I think we're very close to wrapping that up and start implementing. So I'm starting to think, I guess I will put together, unless Steve or anybody has any other idea, I'll start putting together a list of issues out of that design, and also sorting by what to implement first. And I'm thinking what I would like to implement first, I think, is the renaming from provider to location plugin. And now I'm also wondering if we should have a separate branch, or if we could do that against the master branch, because the install is definitely gonna break. So that's one thing. The other thing, I also, excuse me, I worked on fixing the YAML files that were in the example, because they were working and then they weren't, but now they're working again because I fixed. It was just the way the scheme validation was laid out with the version. And I added to the discussion topics a demo, which is very uneventful. It's but I'll walk through the files. I'll show how everything comes together. That's it for me.
That sounds good. Any questions, comments for Carlisia?
You'd mentioned breaking install. I thought we were going to keep that backwards compatible based on what the PR said.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll just add the new things. I guess, yeah, we'll just have multiple flags maybe that would do the same thing, like for things that get renamed. Yeah,
And a deprecation notice on install saying,
exactly.
Hey, use
yeah,
the new thing.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I was just spacing out on that. So no big deal. I can start pushing against master and getting these things done. Oh, so just if you all could take another look, it's pretty. Everything you commented, I addressed.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you.
Should I jump into the demo?
Yeah, let's see. Ashish.
Oh, Ashish is here too. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to move over to Ashish's status updates first, and then we can go into the demo. So Ashish.
Yeah, so I don't have much of an update. I have a few PRs in the pipeline to kind of getting the CSI plugin towards like becoming more open or for open for wider review in the community. So this is coming soon. The other update I had was around last week. We mentioned a survey that we wanted to run in the community to catalog like blueprints or workflows that folks may be using in the community. So please take a few minutes to tell us your responses, and we will act on that once we've some bandwidth open in the team. That should happen post the CSI stuff being wrapped up. So that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashish. Yeah, the survey is super short. And if you want to help out to build out these workflows, please make sure that you mention who you are, either on Slack or on GitHub, so we can reach out to you or tag you in the issues. This shouldn't take longer than about 2 minutes or so of your time. So if you have time and if you are interested in helping us understand all the workflows that are interesting to you, please, please take the survey. All right, now back to Carlisia, demo time.
All right, gonna share my screen. All right, so first I'm gonna show the files. Hold on. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, we see it.
Oh, okay. So the on the branch that I have out for that PR, there, so that we have the design folder. So I have the CLI POC folder, and the base directory has what would be the things that will be installed with the just the Velero server config command that will just kick up the server initialization. And so the kustomize file is this, and it has listed the initial deployment, which is not a complete deployment because it doesn't have things like any plugin, and the CRD specs, and the backup storage locations. I mean, with the new design, these will be separate. The backup storage location, snapshot location will be also in the different commands. So potentially, if we were to have customized examples, these would be in a different folder. I don't know yet. But at any rate, I also included the minial YAML, so I could have access to a storage location, a storage bucket. And so all these files are here under this base directory. And the deployment, as you see, is very short. It's missing, like I said, plugins and some other things. The overlay is what you put on top of that deployment, and that would be specific to what you're running against. So if you want a AWS plugin, that's what's going to go on your customized file, and that would be patched. So that is a deployment resource that will be patched into the Velero resource. So if you look here, it looks very much like the Velero deployment, I mean, we do need to have all of these initial things like the name, so it recognizes what deployment it's going to patch. And then it has things that are specific for the plugin. And potentially you can have, once we have that design all implemented, and plus the secrets as also, which is got moved to a different PR, you can deploy multiple plugins if you want to. And I have here, I'm creating a secret here based on a local file. Maybe that's going to be the right way to do this. I'm not sure yet, but. So this is how you set up kustomize. Basically, you put YAML files somewhere and you tell kustomize where they are, and then you run a kustomize command. So here, for example, the way to do this is to go straight to the overlays that you want to deploy, because as you see here, the overlay stuff that you're working with calls into the base setup, I'm going to call it. And then it deploys that first, and then it deploys whatever is here, excuse me, on top of it. But so just to show, I can do a show and tell. I'm going to deploy just the base first. And now if I go, so K is my alias for kube control. Get pods. We have the Velero pod is there. It is not going to be ready because it's missing a bunch of things in that deployment. So this is part of the new design. We're going to change the Velero behavior to be ready and just checking to see if it got what's missing, like the plugin and the backup storage locations. And once it has everything that it needs to create backups, then it's going to mark itself as ready for creating backups. But it will be ready as opposed to, like we see here, not ready because it's missing things. And so this is never going to be ready. Now, if I do K apply and go to the plugins, I mean, it's going to try to deploy the things from the base, but it's just going to ignore whatever is already there. No, not a big deal. But you see that like the secret got created. It's just saying that the deployment was configured because the deployment was already there. Oh, I forgot I was going to show the Octant page. Hold on a second. But at any rate, it's not going to work. There's something broken. But I just wanted to show the flow. At this point, it should be ready to create backups because the plugin is there. So if we go here, so this is Octant for people who don't know, and Octant is awesome. All right, so this is pretty unbelievable because I have two Velero pods. I should only have one. Anyway, so if we go here, I just want to show the YAML and show that the plugin, the AWS plugin is there now, the image for it. Or maybe it's not. I just did this and it worked. Incredible.
Is it in the other pod?
Yeah, I'm checking now. Yeah, it is here. It is on the other pod. Well, I wanted to deploy the stuff with the base and show that it wasn't here, and then deploy the overlays and show that it was here. But just trust me. So this got patched in, but there is I didn't have time. I wanted to show this today, and I didn't have time to dig in and see what is wrong with the deployment that is not booting up. But pretend it booted up fine, because the main things that should be here are here, and then at this point you can create backups. But that's how you do it. And then if you want to delete the deployment, you just Q control delete -K and point to your stuff, and everything will be deleted. So things are terminating now. That's it.
So Carlisia, so the Octane is like a software can monitor the Kubernetes cluster. The Octane, this one.
Octane is an open source project. You got cut off a little, so if I'm not answering completely what you're asking, it's an open source project sponsored by VMware as well, and it gives you this visual dashboard. So you select whatever namespace you want to work with. I just deleted the Velero deployment, so Velero is not here anymore.
Oh, okay.
It lets you browse through things. You can see your custom resources. You can see, like, if you have a deployment running, you click on it and it will let you see the log for that, for the pods. I mean, it will take you to the respective pods, and then you can see the log for that pod. It's pretty cool.
Thanks.
Alicia, I have a quick question on the YAML files. So I know for the POC, you have those files are static files that are checked into your branch. So is the idea that these will be dynamically generated by the CLI commands, or are we going to be maintaining these statically in the repos?
Yes, great question. So actually, the way I put this together was from with our install command, we have the dry run. So I got the YAML output and I just broke it into these separate files. So the idea is very much that each command would have a YAML output that you then can dump the entire YAML file into whatever directory makes sense.
So can you open like the AWS plugin YAML file for a sec?
Yeah.
I'm curious how that one will be generated.
So you're asking Steve, like, what a Velero plugin add -- dry run would generate, like what the YAML would be that would spit out?
Yeah, because this file is kind of a patch to the existing deployment, and I'm not totally clear on how we will create this file, or how the Velero CLI will create the file.
Yeah, because we could. I don't know how that would work either. I mean, ideally, there would be a way to specify, like, give maybe a schema for the resource and say this just limit the output to this schema. These are the only fields I want, but I don't know if that's possible.
I know you had, Steve, you had asked about just carrying YAML files for some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I commented on that, and it's definitely something I'm wondering about. And there's definitely potentially overlap here. Like if we're carrying YAML files, maybe what we're carrying is just, customized files.
Yeah. I do like that as a Velero maintainer. Right now, well, one of the reasons we moved this Velero install command was that the old YAML we were carrying was just massive, and we couldn't put all of the environment variables and everything in the YAML for every provider. The thing I like with this customized approach is that if you're applying basically a patch to the deployment, we don't necessarily have to specify a whole lot of stuff we don't have to specify custom API or anything. You just say, well, your plugin carries some sort of customized overlay. It patches the deployment with whatever you need, environment variables, volume mounts, whatever, and your plugin knows how to get to those. The only thing we expect is an init container that puts it in the right place. So I kind of like that. And I also know that like our sister project Contour just has like YAML files that they put up at a quick start.
But how would this work for plugins that we don't maintain?
I'm envisioning that they would have to carry one just like that. They would have to carry something just like this themselves.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking out loud right now. I don't know one way or another. I'm curious for folks. I'm curious to get feedback from plugin authors. Like I think Mayank is still on the call. I'm curious to get feedback from people not on our team to hear what they would prefer.
I guess you don't have to say now. You can also come in the channel and chat with us.
No, now you're saying like what they would prefer between this, which would be having a YAML file for their plugin to patch in versus what?
Versus a Velero plugin add and an API for adding secrets and environment variables and things like that.
Okay.
Because basically seeing what they would prefer as they would develop a plugin for Velero, what would be easier for them.
But so correct me if I'm wrong, but we would still have the CLI interface.
Yeah, I think it's not that we wouldn't have the CLI interface. It's that I'm thinking if we just carried YAML files for the plugins, like if we just carried customized overlays for adding the plugin, we wouldn't have to make Velero plugin add be super smart in terms of adding location providers. Like it wouldn't have, I'm envisioning that it wouldn't have to know how to add environment variables and volume mounts and all that stuff. Maybe it just knows how to apply some YAML.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, this is Dylan. I'm not really sure which side I lean on yet, but the way, as I hear this conversation play out, it sounds like a YAML file on the plugin would make more sense, but I'd think about it just a little bit more. I could leave some feedback.
Cool, thanks, Don. Any more questions or comments, concerns? I think we can move on, Jonas.
All right. Thank you so much, Carlisia. And thanks everyone for your comments here. Next up, we have, let's see, Rafael.
Hello, everyone. Jonas, can I share my screen very quickly?
Please do.
Yeah, this is continue one with conversation about supporting multiple API group versions. And if you see on the screen, that's the PR in the pipeline for the change that now backing up all versions of the API group. You see on the top a screenshot of the standard Velero backup. right? You have the directory namespaces under each resource. The PR in root, basically, it takes the same backup for backward compatibility. And then now we have, for each supported version of the same resource, you have a subdirectory for the version with a string preferred version telling which is the preferred version of the backup. And this directory here matches the content over here. Does it make sense? Now, looking forward, how we're gonna take advantage of those multiple versions during the restore. And that's what I wanna discuss and bring to attention is, I have a second slide here. Today, the default, we just restore the preferred version of the source cluster, right? Because we only have one version. Now, going forward, we're gonna have 3 versions in that example here, okay? One of the ideas is whatever name we're gonna call target version mode is now what is the preferred version of the target cluster we are restoring? Because not necessarily gonna match the source cluster. So the first idea is like trigger the detection if the target server is running a different version of Kubernetes than the backup was taken off. And how to do this, there's another PR which put a label on the backup CRD, what the version of Kubernetes. Can do a quick check. If it's different, then we can look at the backup and pick the version on the backup that matches the preferred version of the cluster. That's I want to bring to discussion here. If it doesn't make sense, if it does, can we, is it going to be a feature flag and so on, so I can start wrapping and putting some code around the logic for restore. This other mode, I rather shelf a discussion, which is a little bit more aggressive. Like when doesn't anything match, then we can like try to do some conversion on the fly. I would say this is come after this because on the target version mode, we are covering situations where eventually multiple skipping Kubernetes releases, we're gonna have different preferred versions, and then we want to address that. It's much safer. It's a kind of no-brainer here than whatever magic we're gonna do down the road to do conversion. So here it doesn't include any conversion at all of the objects. It's just matching the versions that we have on the backup. Does it make sense? I just want to get the feeling from the community and the maintainers before I start to code, because that's going to be a kind of like, I'm foreseeing 2 or 3 days of work. And then before I start to do coding, just to have an idea if that makes sense.
So
Rafael,
yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, before you jump into coding at all, it might make sense to just circulate could just be on the issue, just what the UX, what your proposed UX is going to look like for this, as far as, is there a feature flag to opt in this mode, or is it a new CLI flag on the restore command, along with the new API field on the restore object?
Okay.
Might be good just to have an agreement there about what that's going to look like.
Okay.
Will the backup also be behind a feature flag? like an opt-in sort of a thing?
Initially, the PR was a feature flag, but then after a couple reviews, it's just gonna be no feature flag. Just gonna take it because it's backward compatible.
Yeah, so what I was saying is maybe folks may not want multiple versions of APIs on every backup that they take. Maybe on a cell when they want to upgrade or when they want to move to another cluster or to a different version. It is only then they may want to take backups with multiple versions of the resources. So maybe we have like a toggle to switch from one mode to another.
Do you think that would be a feature flag, or should we add that on the backup resource, like a flag on the backup resource?
Yeah, it would ideally be a flag on the backup resource, not a feature flag.
Yeah, I think I was one that had requested that we just do it. I don't think the size difference is all that big, but I could see this being a field on the backup too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
And just curious on the size part, like, do you have estimates on how much bigger this is going to make our backups?
Yeah, it's around 100%, 120%. And the reason is because we're duplicating this, right?
Yeah.
But 80% of the cases today, you have a single version on the API group. So the 20% is like cases like we have on the screen, where we have 3 support versions. But the overhead is in terms of time and space is small, right? Because they're just JSON files.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our backups, as far as the JSON backups go, they're so small that even if we're doubling it, it's, for 99% of users, I can't imagine it's much of a concern.
Yeah, and it's duplicated data, so it should compress easily too.
Yeah.
True.
Exactly.
If you were going to add the flag, I'm assuming the default would be to restore everything, and this would be like a legacy mode or the flag would be kind of single version mode where you would eliminate this extra stuff, but with no flag, the default would presumably be the new version with all the supported API versions.
Hi, Scott. Can you repeat your point?
Sure. I just if we were talking about adding a flag, so you could do the single version backup versus the multiple version backups. I'm guessing you would want the default if you didn't specify anything to be the full feature format, and this would be an option that would not be on by default, which would allow a user to only back up the single old format one version.
If I understood correctly, you're suggesting to the default continue the same?
No, I'm saying that it sounds like the default would be the new format with multiple versions. So if we wanted to provide the flag, it would just be, if you specify this optional flag, then we'd only back up the single version like we do now.
Basically default to new, and then the flag is do old, go to old.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? So the default is the new multi API group support, and then if a flag is passed, then just take the classic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we think that people are going to want to, once they see this, they're going to go, oh, why can't I want to specify what version to back up? Not just the default or not, it's not, I want to really specify the version out of all the possible versions. I want that particular one.
I'll argue that's complicated because you have like at least 20 API groups, right? Then you're going to specify the version I'll be honest, I didn't even know the details between preferred versions and supported versions until you start to do this coding. I argue the end user would even know about, the average user gonna know about preferred version versus supported versions.
I think the person who would care is the person, like the application developer who made a CRD, and they were like, I know specific. They're making like a backup blueprint, and they know they want to do some sort of conversion. That's the type of person who would want to do that in specific. I think for this PR, we don't want to get that specific. I think this is a foundation, and we can introduce, if people want that, we can address it then. I don't know that this PR I think is about getting the data and having it there. If people want to introduce, like, I want to be able to toggle this specific version for this specific group, then we can tackle that.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe the specific version could be a restore action, right? Not a backup, because if you cherry pick on doing the backup, then the code is gonna be super messy. The API that was changed was to get all the versions was basically one method. Instead of the preferred group version, you got the whole universe. So code-wise was not complicated, right? There is some details that we had to take care to create different paths, but overall the change on discovery was pretty much one method. If you start to make some filtering at that time, I think that's gonna be a little bit to maintain. I'd rather do some logic on the restore, and then we can later on discuss how we're gonna break down this logic to make cleaner. So if I take some of the outcomes of this discussion is work on the PR to make a flag on CRD backup to backup classic way instead of the new way.
I'm still on the fence on a flag. I could see it being useful, but like this is fully backwards compatible, and I don't think it takes up that much space. But I'm curious if others see value there.
Yeah, I agree with Nolan. I'm not like, I could see that maybe there's a need for it, but I'm not 100% sure yet.
Yeah, I think
it'd be helpful to get more input.
Yeah, I think the only people who would probably care are people who have their own object storage, and they pay for like the bytes that get that they have to store. So if they're running like scheduled backups, like once a backup once a day, and the backups stick around for 30 days, so they have like 30 days worth of backups sitting in their storage. On the other hand, they may say, I'm going to run scheduled backups without this flag, but I'm going to run using this flag only when I want to move or migrate. So that's where I was coming from, but I don't think anybody is like paying per bytes on their storage. So I think it's fine.
Rafael, have you said the sort of space overhead is around 100%?
Yeah, I said 120%, but I'll give the actual number. So when I took a backup from a kind cluster with the classic way, it was 87K. With the new version, went to 120K. So I forgot about the compression. So we talk about 50% space, right? Once it's compressed.
Would there be a way of structuring this where you didn't have to duplicate the preferred version twice?
First, yes, then based on feedback want to duplicate the preferred version to explicitly say which version is the preferred version. And it's going to make it easier for during the restore. Right.
I was just wondering if there's a way to specify in the file system itself, instead of duplicating the preferred version, some file or some directory that makes it clear that, the preferred version is v1. And so when you want v1, you go to the legacy directory.
You can do that. But I kind of like, but I think that the code is going to be a little bit messy.
Code, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the code on backup, right?
Well, on restore. Oh, I would think, but mostly
maybe both. Yeah.
Yeah. You would write it during backup and read it during restore.
Yeah, because I think I had suggested on write that in that namespaces directory that you drop a file that was named like we have the v1 preferred version. I was going to suggest dropping a file named the version or preferred or something like that.
Yeah.
That it just wouldn't be referenced in the current paths. It would just be ignored, but new ones could use it. But yeah, restore might be a little bit messier.
Yeah, actually, I like the fact that we have, it's subdirectories is kind of like cleaner, at least for, I think would be very polluted. We have like all the objects on the same subdirectory point versions. I don't know. Visually it would be complicated. I think the brain works better in subdirectories. The other thing that, talk about the restore part is really checking the version of the Kubernetes cluster is the same, because you can make a condition at very top level, right? And then carry on with the normal code, and then you put the different code of the smart restore in a different part of the code. Right? It's something like this. So basically the code change for this directory is just on the item backup. We added one condition, right? Checking if the preferred version, then if it is, then just create a different, the classic directory pretty much.
And Rafael, can you go to slide number 7 real quick?
Sure.
I think this is, so like the whole point here is to like get ahead of this problem, which is we're starting to see some API groups fall away. Only a couple have happened, but like API extensions v1 beta 1 disappeared. Like
oh no, this is the preferred changes, but what disappeared was so
apps. So like this format is going, it's not necessarily useful if you're staying up to date with your Kubernetes and you're always doing like point release upgrades, you're probably fine. But if you're doing a big jump from 110, 111 to 116, you're certainly going to notice, hey, my deployments aren't supported anymore. So this is in order to get ahead of that problem, is the whole reason we're looking at this work, to make make your backups more long-lived and more useful for doing bigger jumps.
So should we agree that the flag at this point is required or not, or just make the new standard for whatever next release of Velero gonna be?
In my opinion, start out without the flag, and let's not add the flag unless people start asking for it.
And for the record, whatever the community wants, I'll do it. So if they down the road want something, I'll jump in and code that up.
Now, I will say, just for our use of it, I don't see us wanting to use the legacy version because we're particularly interested in, backing up and restoring to different Kubernetes versions, and so for us, having all that in the backup is important.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it, right? I gotta tell, the end user does not know top of their head the API group's preferred version and support versions. Speaking out of my experience, you usually only one particular API groups, but by the end of the day, you really memorize the versions that you run in terms of Kubernetes version. I really want to see someone take a backup on 1.11 and restore on 1.25 and transparently happens, right? And that's the whole point of this exercise. Or anything else from me?
So
any other suggestions?
Yeah, just following up here. What are the action items for next steps?
I'm just gonna request the folks should look at the latest version of the PR and see if that makes sense. And if that makes sense, I would like to switch a little bit of context of the restore. I'm gonna put a little proposal like Steve suggested in terms of UX and circulate. I have to learn the restore code. I know about the backup, but I'm not gonna be blocked, right?
Awesome. I noted that in the notes there, so everyone can see that too. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rafael. Really, really appreciate it. With that, we only have the contributor shoutouts left. Steve, do you want to lead with those?
Yeah, sure. Threw a few of these in here from the last week. First one, I've got them up on my screen. So first one's for Rochford K, who just got a PR in to improve our docs around backup TTLs, time to live, which is basically the backup expiration period. So it just made our docs a little bit more clear there about how that works. So thanks for that. Then we had Mansam, who got, I think, the final PR in around the CA cert, custom CA cert stuff, added a flag to the relevant CLI commands. So Velero backup describe, Velero backup logs, Velero backup download, etc., to be able to use a custom CA bundle on the client. So I think that essentially wraps up that work around custom CA bundles. I know we have one issue open for adding some docs, but the code's all in. So thanks a lot, Sam, for all of those PRs. And then Mayank got the PR in that we talked about over the last couple of weeks around adding a plugin to remap the selected node for local PVs, if I'm remembering correctly. So I was glad to get that into core, and now everyone can take advantage of it. So thanks a lot, Mayank.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you all contributors for making Velero even better. Thank you, Steve, for writing these down and making sure that they are always communicated here. So thank you for that. And with that, we're ending the April 7th episode of the Velero community meeting. We hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. And yeah, chat with you on Slack and see you all on the same channel here next week. Have a good one.
Bye, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.